All right. NET-223 routers. This is Wednesday, day 2, chapter 1. We did the pre-assessment. We did the pre-assessment today, and we'll take the final assessment next Wednesday or right after class on Wednesday on their own. We'll see how it goes. Talked about a number of things. I'm just going to go through some basic things. We talked about routed protocols, and that could be things like Internet protocol, which is what we use most often, a routed protocol. And then we have routing protocols. Routing protocols help us develop the routing table inside a router, which then allows us to route a routed protocol like IP. Routing protocols, some of the main ones we'll talk about: RIP, EIGRP, and OSPF. RIP, EIGRP, OSPF. And we'll study all those during this course. We talked about when a router boots. Talked a little bit about issues with TFTP, but it does a post from flash. It takes the iOS and loads it into RAM. And then this little mark here, we said there's a way to stop it from loading NVRAM, just in case you need to do a password recovery. And we went through that process together in class. And you can do that by breaking into it while it's loading, and then change a config register from 2102 to 2142, and then it'll skip NVRAM on the next boot, which allows you then to work with the router and recover a password. Of course, then you have to change that configuration register back. We talked a little bit about TFTP. We talked about the two different types of interfaces that we're going to deal with. A serial interface for WAN connections. We will not change the protocol for that. Key things to indicate whether you do or do not do the clock rate. Remember, that's on the DCE side. And then you give an IP address. And with that, you need the mask or the prefix bit, where we do the slash and give the number of bits that are represented in the network. Ethernet. Ethernet does not deal with the IP address. We talk about MAC address. But the Ethernet interface has to have an IP address assigned to it. All right. We talked about why they call it internetworking. Internetworking. We can have a LAN and all the things that go on in the LAN. We can hook that to a router, and that LAN then can connect to a LAN somewhere else through some routed network, like the internet, or it wouldn't have to be internet. We reviewed this briefly, and one other key thing dealing with the OSI model we talked about in this course. Where are we working primarily? And that's right here. A lot of work here at the network part, determining the path, how do we switch packets. We talked about how does a router build that routing table. We can put static routes in. We can have directly connected routes, or we could use a routing protocol and dynamically have the routes develop. Okay, we talked about a few more things that aren't directly listed here on the board. I gave an example of routing, what happens if there's a change, has some reason for the routing protocols to adjust the routing table. That will happen. And we'll learn about all that in the class. Wednesday, we're going to continue on Chapter 1, and we're actually going to get started on Chapter 2, static routing. And they need to set up workstations on our network that we're using in class as soon as they get to class. And that's it.